Hi, I'm Craig Gordon. Thank you for coming to this workshop. This is and we have our third panelist coming in here, Steve Zeltzer. So this is make sure that you're in the right one. This is the workshop on where is the money and how we can fight to make the wealthiest state in the world provide the best education. Okay, so nice catchy little short title. And there's three of us here who are, oh, you are in the wrong one. Okay. So, this is about, so when we talk about where the money is, we often talk about where the money is and why we aren't getting the money and why it's being taken away from schools and why, and we're talking about privatization. So I know that we'll be talking about that. And we also want to take a look at a question I think that I don't see a lot of people grappling with in terms of how we build a movement to actually really fight for the money that is necessary for public education. So we have myself, I'm Craig Gordon, and I'm a member of OEA, Oakland Education Association. I've taught in Oakland since 1990. Currently a substitute, but high school and middle school teacher for many years. We have Jack Gerson, who's also been a teacher, was a teacher in Oakland for a long time and a leader in OEA. And he'll introduce himself a little more when he speaks. And Steve Zeltzer, what should we say about you, Steve?
I do a radio show on KPFA, Workweek Radio, and I've been covering privatization education for about 10 years. And I'm with a group called Defend Public Education Now and United Public Workers for Action.
Okay. Also, maybe at some point, I know that maybe some people might have put their names up on there, but if we could pass around a sheet later just to get folks' names and contact information, that would be nice, because I think this will hopefully start a conversation that we want to continue. So we're going to each speak for 12 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. Although we are getting a little started late. Do you want to start, or you can get started if you like?
Okay,
Okay, why don't you start? So we're going to each speak for 12 minutes.
Okay, so the topic of this panel is where's the money? Why are we the wealthiest state in the United States, 7th largest country in the world, California, and we don't get enough money for public education, free public education. So that's an issue that people need to be asking in California, and actually they're not.
We used to.
Yeah, we used to.
We did. It was my first election.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, that's a question that the people of California, working people, need to ask. Why is it, with all the wealth in California, the money's not going to public education? And that's part of what I want to discuss, because I grew up under the master plan, which was to provide free public education, K through 12 through the university, CSU, and community college. And I went to San Francisco State, $72 a semester. That was a long time ago. So what happened in California that this changed? One of the things about the 70s is that the Democrats, who our unions have supported, allowed a cost shifting in California. They allowed homeowners were increased sales tax or taxes on their houses, and they ended up we're merging some panels, so we're going to have some other panelists here in this discussion on privatization and what's been going on. But what happened was in the 70s, the Democrats, who controlled the legislature, this is a Democratic state, passed laws that allowed a cost shifting. So homeowners in California were being forced out of their homes in the 70s and 80s. As a result of that, in California, the right wing used that opportunity to say, we're going to protect these people who are being forced out of their homes because of property taxes. And Jarvis Gann, a right-wing political operative, said, we're going to reform the tax structure in California by passing a new bill that allows people to stay in their homes if they bought them before 1978, and the other ones are going to pay a higher price. However, companies and corporations are going to be able to keep low taxes for themselves. So what you have now is a disparity in California that most homeowners, of course, move around a lot and the new property taxes on the home go up. Corporations, their property taxes have not gone up in comparison. So you have a cost shifting in California. And the other thing that happened is that the Democrats, who again control the legislature, and Willie Brown and Democratic governors, do not want to tax the capitalists, the billionaires in California.
Steve,
Yeah.
can I just, we have to make a logistical decision here,
sure.
because we do have some other presenters here and other participants. I think we had a couple of other people come in with 4 presenters. So I'm going to suggest that we each do 10 minutes instead of 12.
Okay, I'll do about 7 minutes. That's
Okay,
fine.
and then, I'm sorry to the other the presenters in the other one, but I guess that may, if we can each take 2 minutes to present something on, what is that topic?
Privatization, what happened in privatization, yeah.
So a couple of minutes for,
I think what we have to do is proceed with it rather than trying to, on the fly,
All right.
adjust and try to, all of us should try to keep our presentations less than 10 minutes, and then there'll be time.
Yeah, okay, so
that's what I'm saying.
Do we have a timer or need some?
Yes, we have a timer.
We have a timer. So basically, so what's happened? I mean, basically austerity. California is 46th in the amount of money spent for public education. And you have an unbelievable situation. There are 130 billionaires in California. 130 billionaires. There are 600,000 millionaires in California. So have the Democrats said, let's tax the billionaires? No, really no. There should be, in my view, a capital tax on the billionaires. It's outrageous that you have these people making $40, $50 billion when they have stock options, and that's not going to the public. We need to have a movement in the unions. Now, the other thing is that the unions, unfortunately, are pro-capitalist. They support Jerry Brown. And they don't want to attack the billionaires, because Jerry Brown supports the billionaires. And one of the examples of that was we took up a campaign, an initiative to have a depletion oil tax in California. California is one of the few states that doesn't have a depletion oil tax. Alaska, Texas has a depletion oil tax. And we were told by people, well, Jerry Brown is against that. He gets money, he's related to Occidental Petroleum. He's against the depletion oil tax. So you have a situation in which we have a dire need. Students are the university is being privatized. Young people are in debt. And you have privatization, which will be discussed about Richard Blum, whose wife is Dianne Feinstein, actually stealing money from the pension fund, profiteering off of public education. And so this political crisis and economic crisis that we have in California is actually as a result of the capitalist cost shifting, making working people pay, poor people pay to go to education, which used to be free. And number 2, the unions refusing to go after the capitalists. That's what we're talking about. We need an anti-capitalist campaign to say that billionaires, the capitalists, have to pay for this crisis. That requires a political campaign, an education campaign. So in the unions, for example, they don't want to go after the billionaires. They are not demanding that there be a capital tax on the billionaires. So you have a situation in which registration fees are going up at CSU. Registration fees are going up at the University of California. What we believe, what I believe, I'm with this Defend Public Education now, is we need a united strike action of all education workers and all students in California. The other political problem in education is each union is doing their separate thing. SEIU, AFT, NEA, AFSCME, they're all separate. How can you fight this capitalist attack on labor when all the unions are divided? And this is another political crisis. So, there are more space here. If you want to come in, you can come in. More space. I think we should have had this in the big auditorium, but that's okay.
It's great.
Yeah, that's okay. So,
Can I stop you for a second?
yes.
I'm interpreting for someone.
Okay.
So I will be talking quietly into this, but if that disturbs somebody, I'm very sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Language access.
Okay.
And if you can, you're good. You know, like don't speak
Don't
fast.
speak too fast. Yeah, I know.
Gotcha.
That's impossible for
Interpreting is
you.
a hard work. It's a hard job.
You have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. So in any event, yeah, so what we need is, we need a campaign to go after the billionaires in California. We need to restructure the tax system, and we need to fight in our unions to demand that the unions start going after the billionaires and going after Jerry Brown and the capitalists who shield them. We have a 2/3 control of the Assembly and the legislature in California. The Assembly could pass, we don't have to have an initiative on the ballot, they could pass a tax on the billionaires right now, today, to fund public education, to make education free in California. They could do that. And the unions are not saying, you do it. We need a mass march, mass rally in Sacramento. You do it. Get the money. The money is here. We need an anti-capitalist campaign to say the capitalists have to pay for free public education. That's what we really need in California. So that's why I think we have to have this discussion, this debate, and this education campaign to defend our public education so everybody can go to school in California regardless of your income. Thank you.
That's the way it used to be.
Craig, okay, someone time me.
What are we doing, 10 or?
No, looking at 8 minutes. Okay. I'm Jack Gerson. I used to teach in Oakland. I retired in 2010. I'm teaching now in Alameda for a few months because the calculus teacher at Alameda High needed emergency bank surgery, so I'm filling in on an emergency basis for a few months. And I'm mentioning that because the disparity is gross between what exists in Alameda High in terms of the facilities they have, the resources, the preparation of students who are more affluent, and what exists in Oakland. I taught at Castlemont High. If you know Oakland, you know what Castlemont High has and doesn't have. It's a completely different situation. It's the anti-Alameda High, and that's gross disparity and gross inequality. Money is not a sufficient condition for education, but it's a necessary condition. You can see that when you teach at both of those schools, at Castlemont and at Alameda High. So I'm going to speak about, I agree with Steve that we need that kind of a campaign, but I'm going to speak about another aspect and something that I think ought to be done. I don't have time to speak about the bank campaign in Oakland. I was arrested with 6 other Oakland teachers with about 300 people outside in May of 2011, demanding that Wells Fargo Bank fund public education and pay off or use its influence to get the school debt in Oakland paid off. And I think Craig will talk a bit about that campaign. I won't have time to talk more about it because we, kind of reorganized the workshop. I'm going to talk about something that I think ought to be done in every school district, and it certainly should be done in the Oakland School District, which is, I think that we have to think of running education, running school districts in a radically different way. The priorities in this whole country are upside down. They're certainly upside down in education. They need to be reset and reorganized. In Oakland, the superintendent of schools makes what, $275,000 a year plus fringe benefits will come to about $400,000 a year. And I did a couple of articles a couple of years ago looking at the amount, the gross amount that was being paid, the redundant positions that they had, the way they were padding the cabinet. There were millions of dollars that could be cut. It wouldn't be sufficient, but it's a start towards what I think ought to be done, which is that no administrator should be paid more than teachers are paid, and I believe that classified staff should have their salaries brought up. We should be reducing inequality. Now, if we did that, the maximum salary of teachers in Oakland is what, a little over $70,000 a year? And administrators, we have, it would be immediately $10 to $20 million right away, just from that. But furthermore, the school district should be run by the people who are the stakeholders, and it should be run by parents, teachers, staff, classified staff, students, should be organizing it. I've raised this idea at school board meetings, and when I've raised it, I've said, now I know that you're looking at me like I'm from Mars, because you think, who would work for that? Who would work for less than 6 figures? We do, every day. And we could run the school district better than they do, and should. So that is a very simple proposal, and it's one that ought to get traction. And the argument against it is we need these skilled professionals. We need to pay them for their experience. What we're paying them for is their connections in which they shovel money to each other. Steve mentioned some of the ways. Oakland I was on the bargaining team, the negotiating team in Oakland of 2007 to 2011. For the Public Employee Relations Board fact-finding hearings in February 2010, we presented documentation that Oakland had double the outsourced contracts. Oakland had $80 million a year in outsourced contracts to privatizers. That's 40 million, if you cut that in half and just had the average of school districts in California per capita, you would save $40 million a year, which would have been enough to clear the deficit and start providing some of the things needed for smaller class size. Now, and by the way, the average school district in California is not run well and is not shouldn't be doing that much privatization. So we're talking about $50–60 million or so that could be saved right off the bat there, and that's not counting the padding for the excess administrators. I mentioned the bloated salaries. Oakland also had double the administrative overhead of the average school district per capita. That is, the amount that they paid was double. Oakland was fined by the state for having 78, I believe, was excess administrators in the year 2005, 2006. Now, one of the ironies about that is who was running Oakland in the year 2005, 2006? The state of California. It was under state control. The state fined, or tried to fine Oakland, $1.2 million for the state's malfeasance. That's what goes on in public education every day. So should these people be running it, or should it be taken out of their hands? It needs to be taken out of their hands. In order to do that, we need to organize the kind of movement Steve's talking about. It needs to go beyond the unions. The unions can be a powerful force if they're organized. But we need to have a united movement of workers, school workers and other workers, public workers, together with the community. And we can have that. Community, parents, and students. We can build that kind of a movement. Now, Occupy, a few years ago, was such a movement. It had that kind of a thrust, and it was also a movement against the banks. We're going to have a workshop on the Lakeview sit-in this afternoon, which was a sit-in against school closures, and I urge people to go to it. By the way, in terms of what I'm talking about, in terms of taking this out of their hands, you know that under state control, the state controlled Oakland from 2003 through 2009, they quadrupled the number of students in charter schools. They took over ostensibly because it was a $37 million deficit. When they left, it was $110 million. They tripled it. They tripled it while closing down education, while shutting dozens of schools. At Castlemont, where I taught, we had 1,750 students in the year 2003-2004. When they reorganized it back, they broke it into small schools. In 2011, there were 600 students there. Fremont, which had over 2,000 students, was down to, I think, about 800. McClymonds, which had 1,000 students, was down to 250. They drove out 2/3 of the students there, many of them into charter schools. And Steve talked a little bit about what's wrong with charter schools. Won't have time to go into that, but this is what they did. They closed the library at Castlemont. You had a high school without a library. We had vocational education programs that were self-funding and winning national awards. They shut them all down. This is what is done when privatizers take over education. We have to organize against it. We have to drive them out. And it's not just charter schools. They're running the school districts, and they're running many schools. So we have to organize a movement to take power back into our own hands. I'm not going to talk longer now. I think I've made the basic points I want to, and we have several people who want to present also, so I'm going to stop here.
Thank you. All right. I want to just pass these out. These are sort of the questions I'm going to be kind of raising in this, so we can just take one and pass it along here too. So, I'm going to sit up here. So, okay. I'm Craig Gordon. I'm a teacher in Oakland, currently subbing, but for 24 years taught high school and middle school, and mostly in East Oakland. Let's see if I can pull this back up now. Okay, so I'm going to try to go a little faster and cover. I think Steve and Jack covered, the kind of attacks on public education, quite a bit, and I want to focus on how do we fight for the money, because it's really hard to actually move from from defending against privatization, and now under Trump we're even more under attack. So we find that there's even more kind of a defensive stance than ever. And so I'm going to ask these questions like, how do we defend public education and fight for teaching, better teaching and learning conditions that students need, and how do we fight for the resources that are needed? In 2006, in OEA, we voted for, we passed this vision for what students really need in terms of having a high quality public education for every student. And the first point that we recognized was that students need small class size. I mean, and that's such a fundamental reality that really I don't think even, a lot of teachers don't even think about it because we're so used to having 30 students, sometimes 40 students, and even 25 students. When students come to school, and so many of our students in Oakland and all around the country who are poor and who are the students of color who are, who have faced the, just sort of the deprivation of the whole history of this country, they're not, they're not going to learn what we're setting them up to or asking them to do in classrooms of 30. And there's so many reasons why, but can't go into all of them. I think most people can understand that, and studies really show that that 15 to 1 is really a starting point, really. And people laugh at that because it really would mean doubling, tripling the amount of money in school districts. So we can fight for the resources within the school district. I'll talk about how we've done that, but it really requires much more than is in the district. And until we have a serious fight for redistributing wealth from the banks and redistributing wealth from corporations, and and not just with small little progressive taxes here and there, we're not going to even crack that problem. The other points were, provide sufficient planning time. That's huge. That also costs more money because then you have to give teachers more preparation time. You have to hire more teachers. You've got to put in qualified teachers and instructional aides, and that, is another expense. And also keeping qualified teachers here means conditions and pay and and treatment that doesn't keep teachers here right now. Sufficient material, resources, and much more. Adult ed, childhood education in every site, and so on. And there's other things. Obviously, it's not just resources, and you have to change the entire curriculum. But again, that's not possible to do and teachers can't even have the time to prepare to teach the way that most teachers would like to teach. So at the end of this vision, we said, how do we get there? Well, first we focus on the schools of greatest need and the students of greatest need. We need to at least fight for more resources for schools in Oakland. We call it the flatlands, the schools in the lowest income areas, which is still probably 3/4 of the students in Oakland. And then you're going to have to fight for that money. We talked about how if the Port of Oakland takes in $33 billion at that time. I'm not sure what it is now. If you were able to, but these things are not easy to do in terms of how do you actually have a mechanism to tax the port, or how you tax Clorox, or tax. Or make Kaiser and all the other big companies in Oakland, put up the money. We quoted King in this campaign, in this vision, because he talked about this 50 years ago a lot. He talked about you really need billions of dollars. It wasn't, people don't actually, most people here know about his radical vision. We don't know, he was actually talking about the money and talking about redistributing the money. And really fight. You can't. The reforms that had been won were only a start. So Jack actually said in 2008, after we passed this vision, how do we take it off the shelf? Because we still have it. You can get it in the OEA office, but we're not really fighting for it much. So going to just very, very briefly go through a little history. We got to that because in 95 and 96, we struck for 26 days for smaller class sizes. We had tremendous community support, and we were, like I say, it was more than a month of school days that we were out, but in the end, and we think it really did pave the way for class size reduction statewide. There was a bill passed that CTA was lobbying for, and our strike certainly coincided with that. And a couple months later, my son, who was then going into kindergarten or first grade within a couple of years, benefited from that, and so did many, millions of children for a number of years. But the money has kind of dried up. We never got we never actually got class size reduction in our contract. So when the money dried up, we got large classes again. We focused on smaller class size, we got community support, but we didn't really look at the bigger picture. And we also didn't, by not looking at the bigger picture, we ended up allowing ourselves to be pitted against, have the district pit classified workers, against us, and they're trying to take your jobs. And so that was ugly and very weakening to the struggle, and so we're going to need to find a way around that. So we started a campaign called Redistribute Corporate Wealth in 2003, where, as I mentioned, we demonstrated it at Chamber of Commerce, that the state administration took over Oakland in 2003. Which began this process. They had Broad Foundation appointed administrators who very systematically began closing schools, converting to charters, and now Oakland has something like 36. So I'm going to just zip through this because I don't have time. But we went through a number of bargaining rounds, and meanwhile we did try to raise this issue. And in 2007, we had a new round. Jack was on that bargaining team, and in the height of a recession that was fomented by the banks, we said we still want these things. People said you can't demand these things in the middle of a recession, and we said, well, that's the great. The New Deal reforms were won in the Depression. Yeah.
2008.
Well, okay.
2007.
Anyway, so we had a number of different ways in which we tried to raise that, but ultimately, we didn't win that, and the district actually imposed a contract on us, it's not really a contract if it's imposed, is it? But they imposed the working conditions on us. Some of you may be familiar with in 2004, during the height of this, there was organizing right here that was coordinated statewide to try to protest cuts to budgets and so on. So zipping ahead here, we highlighted the fact there was a $13 trillion bailout. Some estimated at $20 trillion. It's hard to know, but the stimulus for federal stimulus for schools under Obama's education department, Arne Duncan, was like a fraction, a small, infinitesimal fraction of that. So we demonstrated at banks. This kind of changed to a banks, schools not banks campaign, and schools and public services in 2011. Is that 12 or 10?
That's 8.
It's 8. Okay, good. Phew. All right. So there was, we demanded a meeting with Wells Fargo. We targeted Wells Fargo for a number of reasons. They're all bad. They were like the big 4 or big 5. There's Chase and Bank of America and so on. At a meeting with Wells Fargo executives, we actually did, before we even had the sit-in there, they did close their office one day just for a pretty small demonstration outside. And then we had the sit-ins, and there were 7, I think, people, including Jack, who were arrested, and we had a few hundred people outside. So we had something going, and we were in a coalition with ACE. Many of you know what that is. It's a community organization. They were focusing on home foreclosures. So we were talking about stop home foreclosures, and SEIU 1021, which represents a lot of school district workers as well as others in the area. But I just want to point out, as people talk about how NEA is not, and CTA is not fighting for this, here it is. Jack and I both actually, and I brought something in 2009, and then we both brought resolutions 2010 to the NEA calling for action, like nationwide action, strikes and where possible, other types of work actions to demand, to start to build this movement. And Michael Eric Dyson, who's he's accommodated quite a bit to a lot of the neoliberal reforms, and often was an critical
I wouldn't
apologist.
say quite a bit. I say completely.
Thank you. But he's still, because he's written a lot and knows a lot about Martin Luther King's radicalism, when I asked him about this at a a pre-conference workshop, he passionately endorsed that idea. He said, this is in the tradition of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign, and we should all do it. And everybody, or hundreds of people in this forum, they all applauded it. And then the next morning, NEA officials told their state delegates to vote against it, and people generally do what the NEA officials tell them to do in their delegation. So it resoundingly went down both in 2009 and 2010. So I just want to try to get to the end here now, because we're in a new round now, and there's actually
What was the motion that went down?
well, there were different ones. They were basically, the first one was for strikes and other types of work actions at any, at various locals and affiliate groups within the National Education Association, which had, has 2+ million, close to between 2 and 3 million members, to demand money for schools, not banks, and public services as well. And they can't do that. And so now we're looking again. We're trying to at least focus on the school district's malfeasance and its top-heavy, salaries for top administrations and contracts for all of the cronies and private, nonprofits and profit businesses that are for profit. But we've been able to see that if Oakland spent at the median of Alameda County, there'd be $55 million more. That still wouldn't be enough, actually, to do what we want to do, but it would be it certainly would be a start. So the last thing I was going to mention, I zipped through that slide too, but is that there is a possibility for statewide action. There's been a group, and it has been sort of top down up to now. It's been top down and mostly coordinated by the presidents of locals of about 8 or 9 different unions, notably UTL, Teachers Union in Los Angeles, San Diego, Oakland, San Francisco, Richmond, San Jose, and others, to coordinate bargaining and have some coordinated demands for smaller class size, for more resources for those communities and students most in need, and also, as they call it, to ensure charter accountability. Now, they also have a position which I hope we'll highlight more, which is for a moratorium on charters. But the idea is to start putting pressure more on charters that they can't exclude and they can't discriminate and so on. So these are the questions that I ask us to consider, because I'm still trying to figure out how do we build something. So how do we avoid being pitted against other unions and workers when we're demanding reallocating spending? How do we prevent a repeat of our leaders who don't bargain transparently usually, agree that the money's there, but then agree it's not at the end, and we end up not getting anywhere? How can we organize the fight beyond the district and go for the money in corporations and banks that we really need? And how can we do this in conjunction with parents, by the way, and community as well as other unions? And that's something else OEA has been trying to do. So you have those questions. If anybody else didn't get those, that's the main thing I wanted to leave you with. Thank you.
Go to the other panelists.
I'm on it.
Okay, so like I said,
We have to 12:45.
we've been moved to 12:45. Okay, I would like us to really have at least a half an hour for discussion.
Yes.
So I don't know how many people came to present.
Right, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I
No,
understand.
wait a minute, the presenters that we're going to have in the other workshop.
Yeah, that's
We've
at
merged the
3 o'clock.
workshop.
I understand. I understand.
Raise that hand.
I understand. That's what I'm saying. We had 3, and now we have
So if
5 more.
if they-
So
If they have 5 minutes each, that'll take us to 12:30, and there'll be 15 minutes for discussion. So I think that's what we have to do.
Yep.
okay.
And do we have to report,
We have-
present again at 3, or what?
No.
Because it says 4 o'clock.
No.
If anyone wants to volunteer, if any of the speakers
Oh,
want to volunteer for perhaps speaking in the afternoon, I'm in the facilitation committee and I can try to arrange that. Because we're running really short on this particular workshop, so.
Why don't we
that would be
just
really
move on? We're
appreciated.
spending
Let's move
time
on.
discussing this. Why don't we move on?
So,
Okay.
okay, so George, and
Yeah, my name is George Wright, and I'm on the editorial board of the United Public Workers for Action, and I have a handout of a document what we put together to try to explain where we are at this moment and why. Having been a historian and a political science teacher for 46 years, I think that's what I'd like to do, is not talk about strategy now, because there's a lot of experts here, but to discuss why we are here and why. There are 3 points I want to make very quickly. First of all, I feel personally that I'm a child of the California Master Plan for Higher Education. Many of you probably know what that is. Back in 1960, the real Governor Brown passed this legislation that created the California system, which included junior colleges at the time, state colleges, as well as the university system. And the basic premise of that system was access and free education. In fact, when I graduated from a public high school in 1962, an excellent public high school in South Central Los Angeles, when I went to community college, I paid $7.50 for tuition, and books were like 95 cents, $1.45, those kinds of things. Obviously, we've had inflation over the years, but I factored that in at one point, and textbooks would still be 20 bucks, 18 bucks, something like that. When I transferred from community college to Chico State, paid $47.50 a semester. And when I graduated, I had a state guaranteed loan that I'd taken out to do graduate work. And I think when I graduated, I owed $1,000, okay, which I was able to pay off because I got a teaching job, lickety split. Okay, so the world was much different than it is now. I taught at Chico State for 34 years and taught at Skyline College for 8 years. And I guarantee you, I've watched this whole process unfold as a student, as a teacher, and a political activist within the public system, but also related to issues from Vietnam all the way up to the present. So I think I have a personal history of what's happened. There's a lot of things I could say about that, but since we have a time limitation, I'm going to move on. The second point I want to say is that public education has always been integral, if not central, to the capitalist system that dominates the United States. And we can never forget that. And in fact, public education has some specific roles or functions that plug into the capitalist system. One is training, to train young people, older people if necessary, into certain skills, into certain fields. I've seen the curricula, the emphasis of the curricula shift from the 1960s, education, social welfare, psychology, things like that. By the end of the 80s, business, computer science, and then currently, obviously, curriculum is aimed to train to do the second important thing, and that's to channel people into particular sectors of the economy at a certain time. The third function of the system is socialization. And in fact, the modern public education system started in the 1880s, 1870s, 1880s, and 90s. And a major function at that time was twofold. One, to train people that had just moved to the city to be urban workers, to work in the industrial sector that was exploding under the Great Transformation at that time. And secondly, to train people to be good Americans, because as you know, some 20 million immigrants came from Europe and Asia during that time, and the public system was aimed to make them good Americans. So those are the particular functions. There are also very positive functions, social mobility, which I was working class Negro in the 1950s and 60s, and I became a university professor. Inspiration from teachers, which is what I believe in very strongly, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for 5 or 6 teachers. We could go on and on with that. The third point I want to make is to put it into detail. There have been 3 major phases of public education, from the beginnings of the modern system in the 1880s up until World War II. The industrial base was pivotal, and then post-World War II period, 45 to the 70s, which was dominated by corporate liberalism. As Pat Brown said, Governor Brown said when he was signing the bill, we've got plenty of money to pay for this, okay? Because capitalists were being taxed in the 70 to 90% range during that time. The system still continued to train, channel, and to socialize, but 2 other functions came into play as well. for public education. One was to be a reserve labor pool for the baby boomers, et cetera. There's a lot can be written on that. And one more point, and that is the military came very central to education. I just passed this paper out that I wrote that deals with the neoliberalism, which is the current stage we live in, and why all of these issues that we're concerned about have come about, and it's because of the monopoly financialization, neoliberal model of capitalist accumulation at this point, dominated by the drive for capital accumulation. There's $500 billion paid in public education every year, and the capitalists want that, okay? That's what this is about.
Thank you. Is that sign-in sheet that we asked everybody if they could just sign in, and if we need another sheet? Is everybody signed in, or there's all?
Everybody signed it, I believe.
Everybody has, thank you. Okay, who is next? We have,
Okay, I'm going to be real quick. My name is Charlie Schwartz, and I'm a retired professor of physics from UC Berkeley. So what have I got to complain about? Nothing. Now, of course, universities suffered some budget cuts, but this place is going to do all right on the backs of undergraduate students and their parents being charged outrageous tuition rates. So one of the things that I've done since I retired a number of years ago is to poke my nose into the bureaucratic and financial ongoing doings of the university at the top. So I used to go to a lot of Regents meetings and holler at them, and I do a lot of snooping into the financial reports and other data. And I write a bunch of critical papers that I put on a website, which allows, officials to ignore it. So two main issues. One, bureaucratic bloat. I've been able to draw charts of the number of managers and high-level, I guess mid-level management at the University of California. Not the very top level, but mid-level. And there's a graph that goes like that over a couple of decades, whereas the total employment at the university goes like this. So it's management bloat. The data is there. I've tried over many years to get top officials to justify it, and they throw out some reason. They're very creative people. And I look at it's bullshit. And so it doesn't make any progress. Another interesting thing that I've looked at is they have a wonderful way of presenting where the money goes. They love to show graphs of, over the last 20 or 25 years, how much the university spends per student for education. And they have these graphs that are divided, how much the state pays and how much students have to pay. And in the early 90s, it was mostly the state and a little bit students, and then it goes like this, okay? State funding goes down, tuition rate go up. And they say, in recent years, student fees cover about half of the per student cost of education, is what they say. Well, half is a lot. So charging $12,000, $13,000 a year tuition at UC, this is not just Berkeley, but the statewide campuses. But you're only paying for half your education, right? So you can't complain. You're being subsidized by taxpayers and you're going on to great careers. Nothing to complain about. This calculation is a lie. I've been talking about this for a number of years. Because the University of California is not just a marvelous factory for the education of undergraduates. It has graduate students and research work. The research at the university is fantastic, wonderful stuff, whether it's science and engineering or economics or political science or arts or whatever. The basis of the economic and military and cultural strengths of this whole society comes so much from academic research. Who pays for that? Well, there's a fair amount of federal money, some private corporate money, but they have a marvelous trick. That is not just a UC trick, but all the great universities, Harvard, Stanford, University of Michigan, Berkeley, and so on, the entire salaries paid to the professors covers all their work throughout the academic year, teaching undergraduates, teaching graduates, doing research. That whole salary, plus all the benefits, is recorded as an expenditure for instruction. just an old bookkeeping habit. It's been there a long time. And then when they calculate the cost of educating students, they take all the expenditures for instruction, add in libraries, administration, operations, and so on, divide by the number of students, and that's your cost. So I've actually found a way to disaggregate that doing some. I'm a physicist, so I learn basic. I don't learn, I create formulas which are absolutely standard in economics, activity-based costing. And so I'm just going to hand out a paper that shows you some numbers where I'm in perpetual disagreement with my judges. Now, so what? If you are able to organize some large-scale public movement for improving the funding, the public funding of public education, bottom to top, I think bringing up some of the issues I've talked about, well, they're particular for the top scale of academic elites, and in many ways apply to the top scale of economic status of students and parents. You may find some components there who could join that movement because they realize they're being screwed a little bit unfairly. Okay? So that's my offering. I hope it's fine. Okay, thank you.
So how much time do I have? I'm confused.
5 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
Okay. My name is Rick Baum, and I teach part-time at City College of San Francisco, which is the common way of teaching these days, where people are contingent, they have no job security, and they get paid profoundly much less than the tenured faculty at different schools. And a lot of what I'm going to say is going to dovetail with what George said, is that we're in an era of capitalist stagnation. There was rapid growth in the 50s and 60s, and now it's more stagnant, and that has a profound impact on our institutions, including our educational institutions. So where they were expanding in the 50s and 60s, they're now stagnating, and at a community college like I teach at, which is predominantly teaching working class students of color, which is what City College does, they're finding new ways of changing things. And one of the things that's happening at a place like City College is that the powers that be realize there are not jobs for college graduates anymore. And so one of the things they're doing is downsizing the college because they don't need as many students with college degrees. And that's one of the things that's been happening to City College. There's three major, I would say three aspects of the changes taking place. Privatization, which a lot of people have spoken about. I'd also say transformation and the rapid expansion of the student loan industry. When people complain about higher tuition, that feeds into the student loan industry. It enables them to make a lot more money, so that the outstanding amount of student loans right now is like $1.3 trillion. And I think it far outstrips even credit card debt. The other thing that's happening is transformation, and there's a greater and greater effort to see to it that schools better serve the needs of business, so that the students are trained with skills that are desired by business. We heard this from Obama, for example, in his 2014 State of the Union address. He described his desire to connect companies to community colleges that can help design training to fill their specific needs. In other words, turn the schools over to the corporations and let them decide what students should be trained with and what skills they need, as opposed to letting educators run the particular schools and decide on their programs. That was Obama. That's the Democrat. That's not the Republican saying that. We see the same thing being said by Robert Reich. He was a big hero at the school. He was Clinton's Secretary of Labor. He had a column in the Chronicle a couple of years ago, in which he discussed the uselessness of a college degree to many students if they go to college for the purpose of getting a job that pays them well. So what he advocated in his column is that we need to think of changing our schools, and community college can play a leading role of training people with vocational skills. And then business, and the role for business would be, this is Reich's words, business could be advising on the technical skills they'll need and promising jobs to young people who complete their degrees with good grades. Listen to the words, promise jobs, not guaranteed jobs, and only promise jobs to those who get good grades. And so what's behind all that? They want to create a surplus of trained workers to keep wages down. And this is the liberal alternative that we're being hit with, and this is what liberals are offering in terms of the education. At City College, so there's a lot more that I want to talk about. Let me go through the problems of what's been going on there. If you're familiar, we've had this accreditation crisis for 4 years, which is only part of what's going on. And they've been using it to attack and downsize the college and three things are going on at the same time. One is privatization, which I could give you details on that if we have a question and answer period. Another is transformation. So we have the bloating of administrators, but we're also creating administrators who run the place like a corporation, a military, with a top-down model. They're very secretive in the decisions they make. People are not aware of what's going on, and they want to exercise all control from the top. At City College, for example, I don't know if this is true of other administrators, and I'm not one of championing deans there, but the deans have contracts in which they're told that they can be fired without cause immediately. And so what kind of deans does that create? It's going to create compliant deans. They're not going to act counter to what the administration wants. The other thing, because of San Francisco, one of the reasons we're downsizing the college is to free up its property so that the developers can get their hands on it. This is supposed to be a conference about labor, and we are here, I hope, to create a stronger labor movement. Unfortunately, the teachers union at City College has gone along with a lot of the downsizing. They haven't fought it. Recently, there was the administration announced a couple years ago they're going to reduce 25% of the classes on top of all the ones that have already been reduced. And the union says that's their prerogative. We can't fight that. Let me just say one last thing. The other thing that the union hasn't done, it squawks about the cuts, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything about the selling off of the college's property. And so I guess what I'm saying is things don't look good, and that's why we need a grassroots movement where people are empowered to run things, a democratic union movement, because if the members make the decisions, they're going to be tied to their decisions, going to be more active in trying to bring about changes.
Hold it a second, Rick. I want to say Rick just published an article in Monthly Review on this very topic, and you can get it online or order it, okay?
Well,
Rick Baum, Monthly Review.
But it'll be a couple of days.
Oh,
Right here. A teachers union against itself? That's it, right? At Pegasus store, you can find the monthly review, the latest issue.
right on.
Thank you. Okay, we have what, 2 more? You're sure? You want to?
I'm gonna wait till 3.
Okay.
I was asked to come talk about privatization. I'm a gardener here on UC Berkeley campus, a member of ASME, though I'm not speaking for ASME, I'm speaking as just an active member. It was either failed outreach or they didn't want to join. I kept emailing and haven't heard back from my union leadership. And I want to talk about privatization from the ground up. We're seeing, ASME is the largest employees union in the state, and we're seeing the ranks of our service workers and patient care workers decimated. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that we kicked their ass in 2 contract fights in the last 5 or 6 years. After 20 years of flat wages, 20 years of no movement, the union got extremely active. We did a couple of strikes, we did all kinds of speakers boycotts, and we're very successful. If I have a chance, I'll read you some of the things we won. However, there's a large proportion of our workforce that's still needing public assistance because they're working for $14, $15, $16 an hour. UC's excuse is operational necessity. It's in our contract that they can use that excuse. And they also say, oh, it's only temporary or we need a specific skill. That's how they remove workers. And it's not, we're not facing a huge amount of layoffs. We're facing attrition, injuries, retirements that people are not replaced. My department, which is in the real estate services, it's the grounds department. We've gone from like 24 gardeners down to 12 or 14.
Wow.
We had 4 tree workers, and now all the tree work's being done by off-campus organizers. If you walk around the campus, you'll notice painters, electricians, tree trimmers, custodial, ABM working, and they're working for up to 50% less than the workers who've been here for a long time. Recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, they privatized half the restaurants and cafes on campus. If you walk around, you'll see in the new Cesar Chavez building, all the restaurants downstairs are corporate. Ramona's, which these were Cal dining services, and now they're private, outsourced, and these you can be sure the workers are not don't have anything near the package that our workers have. We've been demanding that AFSCME's been demanding that the university insource people, and has had some successes, but at the same time, you see at UCSF they got rid of their IT workers and outsourced the IT to India. So it's funny, I was reading something yesterday that said they're training people for the knowledge economy and then they're shipping the jobs out of the country. It's ridiculous. Some of the things we've done to fight back in coalition with other unions, with the students, have been great. There's a Justice for Workers organization. It's gotten some people rehired, brought some people in-house, but like AFSCME was really proud of bringing 80 outside custodial and food service workers in-house and into our employment. But at the same time, we probably lost that many on this campus, you know, from all physical plant, everything, painters, electricians, gardeners. We started the speakers boycott, as I mentioned. In 2015, there was a measure that went through the state legislature. Governor Brown vetoed it, and was to force the outside contractors to give the same package to their workers that we get. Brown vetoed it after UC lobbied them, and part of the reason I'm not as active with AFSCME anymore is I got pretty angry because the university would be very happy to pay, like American Building Maintenance would carve out a group of their workers, pay them as well as us, just to get rid of in-house employment. Because not only do they have to pay us and give us benefits, we have children, we have, just there's a lot more expenses to having the employment in-house, and you can just tell ABM we don't need 50 people this week.
1 minute.
Okay. So I argued vociferously that it was a risk to try to bring those workers who are outside contractors up to our level. Real quickly, I wanted to say the kind of thing, this is what we want to be the floor of all workers in America. This is the thing, we get a lot of shit for the benefit package that we have. They'd say, oh, there's no more room for the benefit package. We have medical, dental, and we can buy a vision program. We're all in a retirement plan. You can get a voluntary life insurance, short and long-term disability, pregnancy disability leave, family and medical leave, family care, referral services, and there are some daycare centers around campus, paid sick leave and vacation leave, 2/3 fee reduction on university courses up to 9 units a semester. Meal shifts and breaks are in our contract. We have a grievance procedure against management, job security, and we can fight for a safe work environment, and we have seniority. So those are all things that we want all the workers in America to have. But we get a lot of shit for, they go, no, you got such a great package. You should get down, with the part-time, temporary, $10, minimum wage workers. Anyway, that's enough.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you to all our wonderful panelists. This is supposed to be and intended to be a democratic and action-oriented conference. So we want to hear from everyone who hasn't spoken yet, both Q&A, but also what are your thoughts about everything that's been talked about and what could we do about it. So if we could keep it to 2 minutes to make sure that we can hear from some people. So the floor is open. Questions, comments, concerns, ideas. Yes, over there in the back.
So I wanted to ask Craig and Jack and the teachers, what do you think? Do you think that's auspicious that those 8 unions, urban unions, are getting together? They say they're going to bargain for salary together. I mean, that would be huge. I think it's really good. And I also wanted to ask you what you think of CTA's limitations on the 3 bills they have in the legislature, that it will be limitations on the charter schools. Yeah, it's reform, but it's absolutely necessary. And nobody's going to repeal that Prop 39 tomorrow. So.
Well, so I'll say one thing to it, and Jack. So I would just say that Yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. And it's actually, it may be up to 9 or 10 urban locals, and it wasn't initiated by CTA, fortunately. And this was a number of locals, but again, I think that there's varying degrees of involvement by the rank and file. Even in Oakland right now, I think we're just still trying to get more involvement in that. But I think it has a lot of potential. It's not like we're all going to be we're formally coordinated, and we're all that there's a formal coordination of a strike or specific demands, but the general demands are class size and more resources for this for low income and students of color and communities of highest need, and to push for for more to try to get some control and get the districts to support. It's kind of symbolic in a sense to get them to get behind these bills for charter, to rein in the charters. But I'll just say that my major hope would be that we could also, since we've had these demands and these campaigns in Oakland to demand money from banks and from corporations, it's very difficult to do just on a local level. And so a lot of people say, how can we do that, just get money for Oakland? I do feel it would be very powerful if we could actually get some coordination from at least a few of these unions. If in LA and Oakland and San Diego you had coordinated actions and demands and raised the profile of that as a statewide issue, that would have tremendous potential in my mind. Jack?
So, my feeling is I support it, but I'm also not tremendously hopeful. The reason that I'm not tremendously hopeful is that I think that the way that things happen when you go to the presidents of various unions is that they then start negotiating to moderate in order to keep everybody on board. How are we going to really get this through? What do we have to give up? How do we horse trade? I was on CTA's state council for several years, which I was on the Finance and Public Education Committee. I saw this all the time. If you have a movement from below, then that can, where it's organized from below, supporting things like this and moving, then that has potential. But if it's coming from above, not so much. So it depends really on how this thing is organized, because I've seen this over and over again. CTA had an initiative against Prop 13 back in 2003, 2004. They pulled the plug on it. Why they pulled the plug on it? Because they were threatened by the Chamber of Commerce that would go after the agency shop. They didn't admit that till 7 years later when we had a confrontation and at a large meeting. But that's what happened. So I really believe that it's the nature of the movement from below that's going to determine whether these things happen. And if there is such a movement, you can take these things a lot further.
All right, so I saw a brother over there.
Yeah.
Red shirt.
Yeah, Dr. Wright said something about the military-industrial complex essential for public education. I see that there is always money for ROTC and the military recruits on campus all the time. And even right here in Berkeley, they got right on downtown and a Marine Corps officer recruiting training program. So what are the trade unions the educators trade union doing against military recruitment on campus? They are doing all these things that they even call military recruiters that know that students will drop out to recruit them as an enlisted person. So that's my question, what the trade union movement is doing against militarism and recruiting on campus.
Since I'm not active in a trade union, I don't know specifically, but my guess would be nothing, okay? And I assume there might be people in the room that could be a little more clear on that answer. Yes?
Well, I recently, there was a job fair at Palomar College, and a lot of the people represented there were from for-profit universities. It was for the students going on further. And military is always there. And the answer that I got at the last board meeting was, well, it's public property. And there's nothing that we can do to keep anyone out. And so now I'm asking for counseling for students to understand what would happen if they went to Phoenix or university or some of those schools where they end up greatly in debt and no job and no education, no real education. So it's public property, and that's how it's hard to keep anyone out.
other comments? Did I see your hand up?
Yeah, a couple of comments. One, if you, excuse me, sir, what you were talking about from the grassroots up, look at New Orleans in the 1880s. You're a historian, that's why I'm looking at you. When the longshoremen, they had been pitting the blacks against the whites forever, the working longshoremen, and they weren't able to divide them. In other words, if everyone can join forces on the ground level, frontline employees, then when they come in to divide, they can't do it because they've made the decision. And that's the best example I know of where that actually worked. They never managed to bust them up.
1934 San Francisco
Yes.
general strike.
Yes, same thing,
went to black
except for they
community.
shot a bunch of people in the streets.
Right. But the RW went to the black community,
Yeah.
said, you know, we need your support and we will guarantee that we will work to get you good union jobs if you support us. And that was the basis.
Right, and then
Bridges did.
build it up. And I'm sorry, what was the last thing you talked about?
I think percent.
Oh, okay, the last, I had something else, but I lost my thought.
All right, so there was a comment over there in the back. Please raise your hand if there's anything that you
Yeah, I
want to
just
share.
want to
or-
address this gentleman's point about the military and
That's what I want.
labor unions. Probably a quarter, third of the labor unions are working in the industry, in the military-industrial complex, so to speak. And the second point I would make is that a lot of universities are trying to attract veterans. And so they're not going to step on ROTC or try to shut down recruiting because veterans come with financing. Some come from financing after they retire from the military.
Yeah, and we fought the 60s, 70s for
Yes.
ROT off campuses, and now they're coming back in droves.
And Berkeley fought it, actually, back in the 90s, they fought it, and they lost. And that was Berkeley Unified. It was a huge deal, or late 90s, I think it was.
Chair right here.
Yeah, just wanted to share just a bit about, as we're kind of talking about some of the frustrations that's going on with education. On that point, in terms of public education, particularly higher public education, being privatized, having less money, I'm seeing now more the one aspect of the government that is doing well, the repressive arm of the state, is now investing money in recruiting and shaping curriculum vis-a-vis not only just ROTC, but vis-a-vis criminal justice studies programs, and then also even at San Marcos, CSU San Marcos, which is North County, and HSI, Hispanic Serving Institute, invited ICE and Border Patrol to come to campus, which is very tone deaf, to say the least, to come and recruit for the career fair. So that's one of the problems that's occurring. It's not just private money, but also the repressive arm of the state is coming in to recruit. And it's appealing. The few good jobs that are left are in repression for folks. But one thing I just was thinking about is framing vision, framing how we should talk about taxes, and maybe even doing a little bit of expose. I think I heard somebody say once that reactionaries own the past and revolutionaries, we need to own the future. So I think we have to show folks what could become, what could be realized, right? And showcase what a vision of what the role of education could be there in terms of good union jobs, local community development, providing ourselves the talent and abilities to solve local problems vis-a-vis schools and education. I think the issues around framing how we talk about taxes as opposed to taxes such a latent term, but perhaps social investment. And then also doing a little bit of exposing what do the local bourgeoisie, how do they benefit from education? And therefore they demand that they pay their fair share. And also, and maybe this is a bit dirty, and I reckon I see, I welcome folks' pushback on this, but to expose what do their kids get? Because I don't think the kids of the bourgeoisie are in 30, 40 kid classrooms, you know what I mean, with uncredentialed or, and terrible learning conditions. So to say, look, what do their kids get? They should pay their fair share too, right? You know what I mean? So I just think, I'm just
I want to just point out, by the way, a lot of these billionaire school reformers and their followers say class size doesn't really matter that much, or it's not a big deal, maybe. And their kids, go to schools with 15 or 12 and 2 teachers.
Yeah.
And those are for kids who need less attention to start with because they have all these other advantages. So somehow, that's an important thing to expose. I think it kind of shows the hypocrisy.
And thank you for bringing it on to the what are we going to do about it and the vision for the kind of education system that we need. 5 more minutes. Anyone else over there?
I teach at Berkeley High. I don't know how many of you are Berkeley residents, but I think one thing we can do is the city of Berkeley and BUSD is really quite hypocritical on a number of issues, and we need to publicly call them on it. For instance, Berkeley is becoming a sanctuary city, and BUSD is supposedly a sanctuary district, and yet at the same time we're increasing our efforts to deport the Oakland and Richmond students that come into our schools. Like 2 years ago, there was, they've stepped up home visits. They visit late at night, so to make sure that you really live in the house that you supposedly live in. And for a long time, Berkeley would kind of readily and happily educate students who came in because, among other things, we actually get money for each student that comes in. But I feel like racism is on the rise in Berkeley, and just a me firstism is on the rise, and it's really affecting the expectations of our students who are less and less in class to learn, and more just that they're afraid of slipping down and not being able to get a great career. And I think just redefining what our city actually stands for and what we really want out of an education, that if we can go in that direction, I think we can also address all the other issues that are being brought up and the funding that we don't have.
All right, so Poema?
I'm a student at a grad student at Portuguese and Spanish department, and we can see a huge setback with especially knowing that in the humanities in general. And I was thinking about this governmentability and what our president has said about the Spanish community. We don't speak Spanish here. And that concerns me because the Spanish community is so great, and that's one of the departments that has been, we have been talking about that a lot, has been cutting down a lot, and that I was wondering if there is any.
Right, so maybe let's hear the comment from the sister over here to make sure that we're gonna have time for it, and then we can skip to your question.
Sí. Bueno, buenas tardes primero.
I'd like to say hello.
Más que una pregunta, quiero hacer un comentario respecto a lo que estoy escuchando.
More than a question, I'd like to comment on what I'm listening to. Primero, ¿quieres presentarte quién eres o no?
Sí.
Okay, she's going to present herself, who she is actually.
Mi nombre es Guadalupe Luquín, vengo de México.
My name is Guadalupe Luquín. I'm coming from Mexico.
De la Coordinadora Nacional de los Trabajadores de la Educación.
Of the National Coordinating Council of Education Workers in Mexico.
Es un gusto para mí estar acá con ustedes. El comentario que quiero hacer es que las participaciones de los compañeros y de las compañeras me hace reflexionar sobre todo el tema que tenemos frente a nosotros en México en este momento, con una insistencia de imponer una reforma educativa
where they're trying to insist and impose upon us an educational reform
que es completamente privatizadora.
That's completely privatization.
Y que toma grandes elementos
and it's grabbing a lot of elements
de lo que se ha venido aplicando acá
what's been applied here
para ahora ponerlo en el contexto mexicano.
To put it within the Mexican context.
La realidad que tenemos ante nosotros es muy compleja.
The reality that we're facing is very complex.
Muy difícil.
And very difficult.
Creo que tendríamos que estar pensando en cómo articularnos a nivel continente.
How we can unite on
para
a continental level.
La defensa de la educación pública.
Defend public education on a continental level.
Y hacerlo en la vía de los hechos, porque hemos visto a partir de
on the ground.
muchos tratados
notice that there's been a lot of treaties, a lot of agreements,
internacionales,
I'm sorry, a lot of treaties, international treaties,
desde la UNESCO,
from
muchos
the
de ellos,
UNESCO and from many different areas,
que pugnan por el derecho a la educación de los niños y
talk about
jóvenes,
the rights of education of young,
pero que en la
poor
realidad se
children,
les está arrebatando este
but in
derecho.
reality that right is being stolen from us, snatched from us.
Entonces creo que sí es una
And so
emergencia
I think
continental
it is a continental
que
emergency
participemos todos de
that we
alguna
all
forma
need
en
to
esta
participate
defensa,
together to defend this.
donde bueno, ya
Where-
muchos maestros
where there are
en
many
el continente
teachers in the
hemos sido
continent
golpeados,
who've been
nosotros en
beaten,
México tenemos masacrados
our teachers have been massacred.
y bueno, tenemos que parar de alguna
And we
forma
have to
todo esto que se
stop
está dejando venir
one way or another,
y
which is
y
coming at us,
sostenernos.
and
Creo
to
que
support
ustedes
each other.
pueden
I
empezar
think all of
con
you
esta lucha, ¿no?
can
De cómo ir
start
articulándose
with this struggle
entre
that you're doing,
los
how
diferentes
you can
estados como
articulate the different
lo han estado
states
mencionando
like you have
y
been
buscar esa
mentioning,
unión que es tan
and
necesaria.
to find this unity that's so
Nosotros en
important.
algún momento lo hicimos
At one moment we
con
were
la
able to do it
coordinadora
through the
cuando vimos
coordinating
que el
council,
CENTE, que era el
when we
sindicato
saw that
en el
the
que estamos todos,
CNT, which was-
no
is
nos
a
representaba,
union that where we were all belong,
decidimos
was not
organizar
representing
este
us. We
espacio
decided to
colectivo,
organize a
que su
collective
principal
space,
fuerza o su principal elemento
which
es la
the
asamblea,
primary element
y a
or
partir de
strength was
ahí
the
es como
assembly.
venimos
And from
haciendo
there,
frente
that's how we've been
un
able
poco
to
a las
organize,
embestidas del
going
neoliberalismo.
little by little against the attacks by neoliberalism.
Creo que nos falta un buen rato por
we
caminar,
have a long
necesitamos
way to
seguir
go
juntos
still, 'cause
y
we need
yo
to get
agradezco y
our
aplaudimos el espacio que se
and
tiene
we are
acá
very
para
grateful
seguir
for the space
fortaleciendo
that we have here for
esta
to
lucha que
continue
tenemos que dar no
strength,
solamente
strong.
desde cada uno de los países,
So
sino articularnos
this
para
struggle has to
defender
keep going, not
la
only with
educación de
respect to
manera
the different,
conjunta.
countries within the different countries, but rather to face the struggle together in a united fashion.
Yeah, two things related to vision. What the neoliberal project has done is to demonize the public space and the concept of the public. And we need to return back to the public, the idea of the public and the commons. Everything is being privatized. And what's important here is the consciousness of the population is also being brainwashed to accept that transition. The second thing related to the bigger question, I'm an international relations professor and all this kind of stuff, and I follow this stuff every day, even though I've been retired for 4 years. The world is this close to a nuclear war, folks, okay? We're this close. These clowns, these assholes in the White House, in the Pentagon, and the neoconservatives, they're going toe-to-toe with the Russians, and they want to confront North Korea, which also means China. We also need a peace movement. We need an international peace movement to stop this. Not tomorrow. We need it today, okay? Because the claims and statements that these jokers are saying towards the Russians and the North Koreans, etc. The U.S., one thing you learn about the United States government, they never back off. When they say something, they mean it, okay? This is very serious times.
All right, thank you all so much for participating in the workshop. Just as you walk towards lunch, 2 reminders. Number 1, in your program, there should be a form to submit proposals for action in the afternoon. This is an action-oriented conference, so we want to leave here with what we're going to do about the privatization of education. Not just how terrible things are, but what we're going to do about it. So do that. And number 2, there's going to be an international panel in the afternoon where we're going to hear more about the CENTE and the other movements against privatization that are going on in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you.